It happened about 3 winters ago, back when I was working out of a distribution hub in northern Missouri. We handled late-night shipments all the time, and on this particular Monday, February 3rd, I was behind the wheel of a massive semi, trying to make an overnight drop before dawn. The roads were empty, the sky was the color of old steel, and a biting wind rattled the cab. I'd been on the road since 3 p.m. and had pushed myself harder than usual, speeding just above the limit for hours. By midnight, my eyelids felt like they were lined with sandpaper. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping it would jolt me awake. It helped for a moment. The highway stretched on like a black ribbon, no other headlights in sight, just my beams cutting through the darkness. That's when I noticed something ahead. At first it was a shadow, then a figure. A person, standing dead center in the lane. I slammed the brakes, the semi shuddering under the weight. As I rolled closer, I made out his shape, dressed in all black, a dark scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. His body was thin, too thin, and his neck looked unnaturally long, as if something about him wasn't quite human. His face, though, was blurred, like looking at a photograph that hadn't developed. I thought about rolling down the window to ask if he needed help, but before I could, he turned sharply and sprinted into the tree line, disappearing into the woods without a sound. My pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed at me to stop and think, but I didn't. I pressed the gas and kept driving. For about 20 seconds, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, a trick of exhaustion. Then, 5 minutes later, it happened again. Something dashed across the highway just ahead of me. At first, I thought it was a deer, but the way it moved, upright, quick, was unmistakably human. Another person, slipping into the woods. This time, I didn't even touch the brakes. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The darkness seemed thicker now, pressing against the cab windows. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles went pale. 40 minutes from my destination, I was swerving slightly, too tired to trust myself behind the wheel. I scanned for a place to pull over and spotted a small gravel turnout, a lonely little rest stop at the edge of the forest. I eased the semi onto the gravel, killed the engine, and leaned back to shut my eyes. I must have drifted off. Not long. Maybe half an hour, but something jolted me awake. The cab was dark and still, the only sound the distant moan of wind through the trees. A feeling crawled up my spine. Without knowing why, I flicked on the headlights. The beams lit up the clearing. There he was. The same man, the same scarf, standing just beyond the reach of the light, only now I could see his face clearly. His mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile, and his eyes were open, impossibly wide, staring directly at me through the windshield. He didn't move. He didn't blink. My hands shook as I started the engine. Gravel spat under the tires as I yanked the truck back onto the road and sped off, heart pounding against my ribs. It didn't make sense. The place where I'd first seen him was miles away, 10, maybe more. There was no way he could have beaten me here on foot. I didn't stop again that night, not until I reached the loading dock hours later and collapsed in the cab, finally asleep under the cold glow of the lot's floodlights. Even now I tell myself I was just overtired. Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. But I've never known a hallucination to smile like that, or to follow me through the dark. I've been behind the wheel of freight trucks since I was 25. Night driving has become second nature to me. Empty highways, long stretches of darkness, and the occasional odd thing you can't quite explain. But one night still crawls under my skin. I was hauling a trailer full of handmade furniture for a supplier on the far end of Arizona. The route cut straight across the state, mostly through open desert highways. It was going to take hours, and I'd started late, which meant most of the drive would be after sunset. Desert roads at night are their own kind of strange, flat, endless, and lonely. No lights, no cars, just blacktop stretching ahead like a ribbon into nowhere. With so little traffic, I let the truck run a bit faster than usual, thinking I'd make up some time. That's when I spotted the flicker of hazard lights far ahead, a red pulse in the dark, way off on the horizon. I eased onto the brakes hard, the semi shuddering under the weight, and rolled to a stop behind it. It was an old, dusty sedan, a faded blue Buick, parked crooked in the desert dirt at the edge of the road. Its hazards blinked steadily. I climbed down from the cab. Call it instinct, but I felt like I had to check. The night air was cold and dry, carrying that faint mineral smell of sand and stone. I walked up to the car and tapped on the driver's window. Nothing. I bent down to peer inside. The interior was dark and empty. I checked the other seats, leaning closer each time. Not a soul inside. Straightening up, I scanned the desert around me. Out here, you can't see far at night. Maybe 20 yards before everything fades into black. But something about the scene made me want to help anyway. I went back to the truck and reached under the passenger seat for my flashlight. It was a heavy-duty tactical kind, so bright it could punch a hole through the dark. When I flicked it on, the beam cut across the roadside and lit up something I hadn't noticed before. An abandoned gas station. 2 rusted-out pumps stood on bare dirt. No concrete, no sign. Behind them, a low building sagged in the shadows. I guessed the car's driver might be inside. Maybe they were looking for a phone or a restroom. The front door hung crookedly, jammed open. My light swept across the interior, a gutted convenience store, shelves toppled or empty, glass scattered on the floor like old frost. It must have closed years ago. I called out into the dark to let whoever was there know I wasn't a threat. My voice echoed faintly, just enough to make my skin crawl. Then I heard it, a sound, quick, sharp, the drag of a shoe on tile from the far side of the room, hidden behind the empty shelves. I called out again, offering help. And then a whisper, low, heavy, deliberate. Leave. I understood it instantly, but the voice wasn't angry. It was wrong, like it came from somewhere deeper than the room itself. A moment later, I heard breathing, wet, heavy, in the far corner. That was enough. My stomach turned to ice. I backed out fast, my flashlight beam jittering across the walls. Outside, as I hurried back toward my truck, another sound reached me. It's hard to describe. Like footsteps, but not quite. For 5 long seconds, I couldn't tell if it was real or if my mind was cracking under the pressure. I scrambled into the cab, slammed the door, and called 911. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. They asked for my location, but how do you explain somewhere off Route 66, next to a dead gas station in the desert, in the pitch black? They asked me to stay on the line and give more details, and then I saw it. The car, the Buick, its engine roared to life. It peeled away from the shoulder, throwing up dust, tail lights shrinking into the night. I hadn't seen anyone get in. Heart hammering, I ran back to the gas station's door, 911 still in my ear. I forced myself inside, back to the place where I'd heard the voice and the breathing. That's when I saw it. A pool of fresh, dark liquid on the cracked tile. No body. Just the evidence of something terrible. I told the operator what I'd found, my voice shaking, and said I thought I'd stumbled onto a crime scene. Within the hour, state troopers arrived, their cruisers lighting up the desert in red and blue flashes. They asked for details, license plate, suspect description, anything. All I could say was that it was an old blue Buick, maybe early 2000s, and a man's voice had told me to leave before I heard a woman scream as the car took off. There was no one left behind, no trace but the blood. They collected samples, took my statement. I had no dashcam then, shamefully, but the very next week I bought one and mounted it in my truck. It's the kind of experience that only happens once, but it's enough. Enough to stay with you, gnawing at the edges of your memory, making you wonder if you were standing in something much darker than a simple crime. I've been driving trucks for nearly 10 years, long enough to know that highways after midnight have their own kind of silence, the kind that presses against your skin. This happened back in 2015, somewhere along a lonely desert stretch between Nevada and New Mexico. I was hauling appliances, though for the life of me, I can't remember what exactly was in the trailer. The road cut through the Mojave's empty heart. Miles and miles of nothing but sand, darkness, and cracked asphalt. That night, my headlights were dimmer than they should have been. I'd been putting off fixing them for weeks, and I was regretting it now. With no other cars around, it felt like I was driving through a black void. I could barely see 20 feet ahead, squinting every few seconds to keep the yellow lines in view. I thought about pulling over and waiting for sunrise, but I needed the paycheck. The load had to get there by morning, and I was already behind schedule. So, I just told myself the road was straight enough. Nothing to hit out here anyway. At least, that's what I thought. It was maybe an hour before dawn when something appeared ahead. At first, it looked like a faint flicker, then the flash of hazard lights. A car, dead center in the road. I slammed the brakes hard. The truck screeched, tires biting the asphalt, and came to a stop less than a foot away. My heart jumped into my throat. The car, a shiny red sedan, newer model, was parked perfectly over the double yellow line. Its passenger door hung wide open. Now, I've never been the kind of guy who scares easy. I've been in bar fights, slept in rest stops that smelled like death, and hauled loads through places you'd never want to break down in. So, at first, I wasn't afraid, just curious. Maybe someone broke down and walked off. Maybe they needed help. I eased the semi to the side of the road and hopped out, thinking I'd offer a hand. The desert night was warm and unnervingly still, not even a breeze. The only sound was the rhythmic tick, 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 the hazard lights echoing through the emptiness. The car was a bright crimson Ford Fusion, the paint gleaming faintly under my dim lights. I walked around to the passenger side, half expecting someone slumped in the seat, but there was no one. I checked the back seat. Empty. No one on the ground. No one in sight. The longer I stood there, the more the silence seemed to hum in my ears. Every few seconds I glanced behind me, expecting to see someone step out of the dark. Nothing. Just endless desert swallowing the road in both directions. Still, I couldn't shake it. Someone had to be nearby. I looked inside again. Everything seemed normal. Keys in the ignition, engine off, the faint smell of warm plastic lingering inside. I walked around to the back. The trunk caught my eye. It was locked. I hesitated, then grabbed the keys from the ignition and unlocked it. But when I tried to lift it, nothing. It was jammed, stuck tight, like something heavy was pressing from the inside. That's when I noticed a rope tied through the latch, pulled down from inside the trunk, and knotted through the back seat. I opened the rear door and peered through. The seat was already half folded, and behind it, I saw them. 3 large black trash bags crumpled together, thick, shiny plastic, bulging unevenly. My pulse started to pick up. I leaned closer, maybe a few inches away, when the night exploded. A gunshot ripped through the silence, the kind that tears right through your chest even when it's not aimed at you. I jerked upright, smashing my head on the car's roof. My ears rang, heart pounding. Without thinking, I dropped the keys, slammed the door, and sprinted toward my truck. Behind me, through the ringing in my ears, I heard a voice, low, hoarse, and angry. "Hey, hey!" It was getting closer. I jumped into the cab, fumbling for the ignition. The truck stuttered once, stalled. I cursed, turned the key again, and that's when I saw him. Standing by the red sedan's trunk, a short, broad-shouldered man with messy red hair. His clothes looked like something out of a farm supply catalog. Worn overalls, knee-high boots. In one hand, he held an old rifle. In the other, a small shovel. Our eyes met. He didn't look wild or crazy. He looked terrified, like I had caught him doing something he shouldn't. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he dropped the shovel, waved his arms, and started yelling, "Wait! Wait!" I slammed the truck into gear and floored it. He took off running after me for a few seconds, then turned and sprinted back to his car. In my rearview mirror, I saw his headlights flare to life and start closing in. I called the cops, rattling out the story as best I could while trying not to crash. The red car was right behind me, its horn blaring non-stop. My whole body was shaking. After 15 minutes of pure panic, flashing blue lights appeared ahead. A patrol car. The red sedan suddenly swerved, veered off the road, and vanished into the desert, bouncing wildly over the sand until its lights disappeared completely. I pulled over, trembling, as the officer walked up. I spilled everything, every detail, and begged him to go after the guy. But instead, he started taking notes, asking for a full report. By the time backup arrived, there was no trace left. No car, no man, no proof of what I'd seen. They told me they'd follow up if they found anything. I never got a call. To this day, my buddies still tease me about it. Call it my desert ghost story. But I know what I saw. I know that red car, those black bags, that look in his eyes. And every time I drive through the desert at night, when the road goes quiet and the air turns still, I catch myself glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see those flashing hazards again. Because somewhere out there, that man's still driving. And I don't ever want to find out what was in those bags. My name's Daniel Cole, and I've been a long-haul trucker for about 15 years now. You could say the road is my second home. The hum of the engine, the white lines flashing beneath my headlights, the endless rhythm of asphalt and sky. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. You pick up the load, check the manifest, deliver it on time. Repeat. The faster you go, the more you earn. Sleep is optional. Back in May of 2019, I was working for a small shipping company out of South Dakota, running deliveries across the border into Montana. That week was a tough one. Extra routes, heavier loads, deadlines that didn't care if you were tired. I decided to do something stupid, pull one long, uninterrupted haul through the night, just to get it all done. I hit the highway around 3 in the afternoon. The air was cold and crisp, the kind that makes you grateful for a hot cup of gas station coffee. By midnight, that same air felt heavy, pressing on my eyelids like weights. I'd been awake too long. My truck rumbled through the flat plains, headlights cutting thin slices of light into the dark. When you've been driving that long, your body starts to betray you. Your eyes blur, your hands slip on the wheel. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a small brown bottle. Smelling salts. Another trucker, a friend of mine named Riley, had introduced me to them years ago. One sharp inhale and your whole nervous system jolts like a defibrillator. It burns your nose, but it keeps you alive. I cracked the bottle open, took a deep sniff, and shot upright, gasping as adrenaline flooded me. For a while, it worked. But by 1:30 in the morning, I was losing the battle again. My head dipped, the truck veered toward the shoulder, and the roar of the rumble strip snapped me back to reality. My heart pounded. I knew I needed to pull over. The problem was, there was nowhere to stop. Just dense walls of pine forest on both sides, no rest areas, no side roads, nothing. I slowed down, scanning the road ahead. That's when I saw it. Something purple, lying right in the middle of the road. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, my brain inventing shapes in the darkness. But as I crept closer, my headlights revealed what it really was. A dress. A woman's purple dress, spread out like someone had just stepped out of it and disappeared. I stared at it as I rolled by. A weird feeling crawled up my spine, but I kept going. I was too tired to think straight. A minute later, I saw a pair of shoes, just sitting there in the middle of the lane. My pulse started racing. The hairs on my arm stood straight up. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I slowed the truck again, hoping I'd find a place to pull off, maybe call it in. My father, Jonathan, was a deeply religious man. He'd given me a small silver cross before he passed. I touched it now, quietly praying under my breath for clarity or courage. A few hundred yards later, I spotted more clothes scattered across the asphalt. This time, children's clothing. Tiny shirts, little sneakers. That's when I stopped. My truck idled in the middle of the road, headlights illuminating that awful scene. I sat there for maybe a minute, debating what to do. Then, against every instinct I had, I climbed out. The cold air hit me like a slap. The forest on either side of the road was still and silent. Too silent. No wind, no insects, just the steady thrum of the engine behind me. I approached the pile of clothing cautiously. They were small, maybe for a 6 or 7-year-old. Both boy and girl clothes mixed together. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line, but there was nothing. Then, crunch. A sharp sound came from the left, deep in the trees. I froze, my eyes darting into the shadows. Nothing moved. After maybe 30 seconds, crunch from the opposite side this time. My blood ran cold. That was enough for me. I bolted back to the cab, climbed in, and was just about to slam the door when I heard it. A child's scream, high-pitched, terrified, echoing through the forest. I froze, my hand still on the handle. Every moral instinct in me screamed to go help, but every survival instinct screamed louder not to. Then another scream followed, identical, like a recording on repeat. I swallowed hard, turned on my headlights, and pointed them toward the sound. The beams pierced into the woods, and that's when I saw them. 4 people, standing among the trees. One of them was holding a speaker. As the light hit them, they scattered behind trunks, ducking into the shadows. But I saw enough. They weren't kids, they were adults, wearing dark clothes and standing in perfect formation. They'd been trying to lure me out. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring into those woods, my chest tight and my breath shallow. Then, thud. Something slammed against the side of my truck from the opposite direction. That broke the spell. I shifted into gear, floored it, and roared down the highway. In my mirror, I caught a glimpse of someone stepping out onto the road. A man shouting something I couldn't make out. He threw something, a rock maybe, that shattered the passenger side window. I didn't stop. Not once. I drove the next hour in complete silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. When I finally made it to my drop-off point, I parked, stumbled into the sleeper cab, and passed out for 10 straight hours. When I woke, daylight was streaming through the curtains. I called the local police, told them everything. They said they'd send someone to investigate. They never called back. I've replayed that night in my head hundreds of times. How close I came to stepping into those woods. What would have happened if I had? I'll never know what those people were planning or who they were. Maybe it was some twisted prank, maybe something far worse. But ever since that night, I can't drive past a forested highway without feeling eyes on me, just beyond the tree line, waiting for someone else too tired, too kind, or too curious to stop.